Speaker today is Jack Kantola, and he's fulfilling assignment number 6 in the Competent Communicator Manual, which is vocal variety. The challenge in this assignment is the appropriate and effective use of voice, volume, pitch, rate, and quality to add meaning to his message. Jack was raised on a small dairy farm just outside Fleetwood, Minnesota. He graduated from high school in 1957 and embarked on a career that took him far away from those farm roots. In his various roles in business, Jack has coached and mentored dozens of people in career advancement and has had the pleasure of seeing many of them achieve great success in business. Today, Jack will use his own experience to teach us how to, quote, mind the gap. Those talk is 6 to 8 minutes. Help me welcome Jack Kantola.
Standing on the threshold of adulthood back in the late 1950s, any list of attributes that I had to offer the world would have been a pretty dismal list. I was a skinny, severely nearsighted young man, not that good looking, still not that good looking. I had a total inventory of 8 teeth. I was recovering from a gunshot wound, and I had a bank account that was absolutely zero. And I owed the hospital for 2 weeks that I spent there recovering from my gunshot. Not a good beginning. On the positive side of the ledger, I had a high school diploma. Barely. I think there is still a chair just outside of the principal office that is dedicated to me. When I walked through my graduation and Tom Riley gave me my diploma, his comment was, "Well, no more skipping school, huh, Jack?" Mr. Toastmaster, most welcome guest and fellow Toastmasters. You know, when you go to England and you go on the underground, there's a signs everywhere that say, "Mind the gap." Mind the gap. My kids, my grandkids all have Mind the Gap t-shirts. In this country, business coaches and mentors do something called a gap analysis. That is trying to understand what is it that we need to achieve the goals that we have. It's a 3-step process. Number one is you have to have a vision for where you want to go, where you want to be sometime in the future, be it 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Number 2, and this is a hard one for people to do, is to do an assessment of the attributes that you currently have. What are they? What is your education? What is your experience? What are the skills that you have that will enable you to be successful? And number 3 is to do a realistic look at the gap, the difference between where you are now and then where you have to be able to achieve the goals that you want to achieve in the future. It's called the gap analysis. And looking at the gap that I had back then, coming out of high school, entering adulthood, the gap was wider than the Grand Canyon. In fact, I couldn't even clearly see the other side. I had no idea what to do going forward into the future. I tried a couple of things. I tried to join the Army. They wouldn't take me. I wanted to go to college, but a zero bank account and no student loans in those days precluded that option. Then, coincidentally, I happened upon a place called the Duluth Area Vocational Technical School. And I enrolled to get a degree or a certificate in electronic as an electronic technician. Thankfully, I was able to do that because in Minnesota, if you're under the age of 21, you can go to the area vocational schools for free. That was a price that I could afford. On the positive side, when I got that technical electronics certificate, it enabled me to get a job as a technician at Honeywell in Minneapolis working on space flight systems. I worked on every one of the Gemini flights. Pretty exciting, huh? But the other thing that happened is working at Honeywell, they had a tuition reimbursement program. And it enabled me to go to the University of Minnesota. It only took me 7 years. But I finally graduated with a degree, a bachelor's degree in business administration. And as I was going through this, what that degree did was, and the experience that I had at Honeywell, enabled me to get a position at Winnebago Industries as manager of quality engineering and administration. Now during this entire period of time, I was filling the gap without really understanding what was on the other side. But that's okay, because what I was doing was I was building foundations for the future. I was making it possible for me to grow and capture and take advantage of opportunities that came along. Once I got to Winnebago and got involved in that business, a vision for what my future was became very clear to me. I knew that I wanted to be the manager of a manufacturing company, the general manager of a manufacturing company. That became my goal. Now the gap filling started to become more specific. I knew, for instance, that I had to become a better communicator and leader. It was actually shoved into my head by a few of my managers at Winnebago, and then the HR manager at Honeywell and the HR manager at Winnebago. And that was when I joined Toastmasters. That is what helped me to be able to take advantage of the growth that I was pursuing. That was a big gap filler for me. I also needed to be able to gain production management experience. I needed to be able to have a better understanding of the financial aspects of business. And finally, I needed to be able to understand and manage sales organizations. Now, every career decision that I made was based on how did that move help me to fill the gap? How was that move helping me to gain the attributes, the experience, the education that I needed to be able to achieve that goal of becoming a manager of a manufacturing organization? You know, the process worked, because right shortly after that, I became the production manager of the cap cover division of Winnebago. I became the production manager and the design engineering manager for the housing division of Winnebago. I was eventually able to become the plant manager at Alumacraft Boat Company in St. Peter, Minnesota. And from there I went to becoming the general manager of Winnebago, California, here in Riverside. And since then I had positions as managing director of, or vice president general manager of Microdot Inserts, managing director of an operation in England, group president at Microdot, and finally my last job was to be the president and chief operating officer of Trumpeter Electronics. During that process, I learned a lot about gap filling. You know, I learned that we have to be able to have that vision, we have to have that goal. We have to be willing to assess where we are currently. What do we need? What are the things that we need to be able to achieve the success that we're looking for? And finally, you can only fill that gap one shovelful at a time. It's not going to happen overnight. But by taking that course and direction, by making that move, we're able to achieve that goal ultimately. I would encourage each of you to take a look at that process and what are the gaps between where you're at today and where you want to be tomorrow. And finally, just remember to mind the gap.